Thank you for joining me back for another video. This is the second to last of this series, the second to last video of this series. Okay, technically it's the third to last because last week I promised you a sort of a bonus video in this series, but the official canon of this series, let's say, is actually going to end next week, which is kind of sad. But, that's okay because I've got more material planned. However, I will throw in a bonus video for you. I'm not going to tell you what that bonus video is about, but it's more of a fun one. It's less of a, structured, let's talk about this, let's talk about that. It does the same, but it's a different kind of thing. It's no, I'm not even going to tell you. So, just a quick recap. So far, we've talked about in the Jewish Torah tradition. So far, we have discussed the Tanakh, which is the written Torah, the prophets, and the Ketuvim, the writings. Then we talked about the oral Torah tradition, the legal tradition. Beginning with the Mishnah, the Gemara, and last week we talked about the halachic works. So the halachic works really sort of closes our legal tradition of the Torah. This week I'm going to talk about something that as a buddy of mine and I have frequently made fun of, because neither one of us buy it fully, but we call it the Spooky Spookies, and it is Kabbalah. So the Kabbalah is in modern times anyway, is the collection of Jewish mystical literature. This is the mystical tradition that exists in modern day Judaism. In ancient times, if you were to say Kabbalah, it would not mean anything mystical. It would mean the books of the Tanakh. That would be the books of the Tanakh, just without the Ta, without the Torah. Meaning those books that are part of Jewish canon, of Scripture, that are not a part of the Torah. Books like Daniel, Ezekiel, let's say Judges, Ruth, all those kind of books in the Tanakh that are not, the first 5 books of it. The word Kabbalah means that which is received. And so when it comes to the application to the rest of the Jewish corpus of Scripture, we just kind of called it Kabbalah because, we received it as if it were a part of the Torah from the outside of the Torah, if that makes sense. It's not important right now. What is important is that the term Kabbalah no longer means that. Now it's applied to the mystical tradition, specifically the mystical tradition that began right around I believe it was the 13th century. We're going to get into that here in just a few minutes. The Jewish mystical tradition, there has always been one, and by always I don't mean that it has constantly been there, as if there's been a sort of a perpetual building on of mystical tradition. Actually, the ancient mystical traditions were very different from the mystical traditions that exist today. The original mystical traditions within Judaism died out, and that's according to Rabbi Avraham ben Harambam. That's the Rambam Maimonides, his son Avraham. He said that. He was a rabbi himself. He said that. So I'm not giving you my opinion, and you need to understand that when I'm giving over information in this video, I'm not giving you information that I necessarily believe wholeheartedly. I'm just giving you the information as it's presented. And you'll see what I mean here in a bit. That being said, if you disagree with some part of this, if you're Jewish, you disagree with some part of this, because I am critical of mystical tradition. If you are Jewish and you disagree with any part of this, don't pick up stones to come after me, because it's not my information that I'm giving over. It's, easily accessible information that really anybody could get to, and it's not hard to get to it. That being said, let's jump right into it. So the mystical tradition, the earliest mystical tradition, I should say, within Judaism, is actually found in the Tanakh itself. We're talking about various places. There are some places in the Torah, for example. My favorite part in the Torah is where Jacob, the patriarch, Israeli, calls all his children together and he says, let me tell you what's going to happen at the end of days. And then it's like he just kind of has a brain fart and just kind of, forgets what he was talking about, and he just starts blessing his sons. There's a reason for that. Tradition tells us that he was about to spill the beans. He was about to tell us about the Messianic era. And God caused him to have a brain fart, caused him to have a temporary lapse of memory so that he couldn't tell us about it. So that's fun. I don't necessarily know that I agree with that tradition, but that tradition is out there, and it is certainly interesting. Later mystical traditions found in the Tanakh were going to be, it's like places like Ezekiel. Actually, Ezekiel is, Ezekiel chapter 1, as we've discussed before, is extremely interesting is a good word for it, passage. It is part of the broader mystical tradition that dates back to Ezekiel's day. Ezekiel apparently was part of a mystical school of thought, which makes perfect sense. If you've ever read the book of Ezekiel, it makes total sense. Later on, you'll find mystical traditions in the Gemara. You'll find mystical traditions in the writings of some of the later writers of the Gaonim, and I'll briefly mention later on. Actually, I'll go ahead and mention it now. So the Gaonim were the heads of the Babylonian academies between the, I believe it was the 2nd and 6th centuries CE. So this is this side of the destruction of the temple, the last temple. So the Gaonim, the word literally means geniuses, and they were quite brilliant, hence the name genius. The Gaonim also kept track of mystical experiences, mystical revelations, that sort of thing that they had. They collected it into various books, but we're not really going to talk about them, for the sake of brevity. Back to Ezekiel chapter 1. Ezekiel chapter 1 describes the chariot of God, the throne of God, and it inspired the Merkava school of mysticism. So Merkava mysticism, Merkava means like a chariot, or the vehicle, if you will. It describes, angelic realms. It describes the Ophanim, the wheels of the chariot. It describes the body of the chariot. It describes Hayoth, the living beasts, who were also there. These, according to mystics, are different types of angels. And Ezekiel was seeing a heavenly vision, a vision of what is going on in the spiritual realm. If you just read the book of Ezekiel and you're not really prepared for that, you're going to be in for quite the shock. But it spawned an entire branch of mysticism called Merkava mysticism, and it focuses specifically on describing the throne of God, the chariot of God, and describing the heavenly realms and any secrets that may have been acquired through visions or dreams that are connected to it. During the time that the Merkava mystical system was in its heyday, the Sefer Yetzirah was written, and that it was written sometime between and this is really all we know about it. It was written sometime between the 2nd and 6th centuries of the Common Era. We're not really sure when it was written, because we're not actually sure what the original layer of it is. But we do know that it was written, and it possibly was written in multiple layers, very much like how I believe that most religious writings are written. You look at the Tanakh. Okay, so there's the Torah, and then another layer is the Book of Joshua, and then another layer is the Book of Judges, so on and so forth. You look at the what is it called? The Christian Bible, the New Testament. Chronologically speaking, the epistles of Paul came first. After that, it was various other epistles. After that, it was the Gospels. Gospels were actually relatively late into the game. After that, it was the Book of Revelation. We'll talk about all of that eventually. The books in the mystical tradition are no exception. So you have the Sefer Yetzirah, which, by the way, the name Sefer Yetzirah means the Book of Formation, and in case you're curious, yes, it absolutely describes creation in a mystical, spooky sort of sense. It talks about the creation of the universe. It describes the creation of the universe through the 10 Sefirot, which, if you are familiar with Jewish mystical tradition today, you know that those are the divine emanations. I, again, am not sold on mystical stuff. I'm not really into mysticism. I don't really have a need for it. So I just know these things. I don't study them. So if you have specific questions about, what exactly are the Sefirot, I can tell you, but realistically I probably shouldn't, mostly because I'm not necessarily on board with them fully. But the Yetzirah describes the creation of the universe through the Sefirot and through the alphabet, the alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet. And both of those are common themes in mystical traditions that came after the Yetzirah. So it's very obvious that the Sefer Yetzirah did have a huge influence on every work that came after it, every mystical work that came after it. One thing that's worth noting when it comes to the Sefer Yetzirah is it's actually the very first Jewish book to just assert that God created the universe from nothing. Now I know what you're thinking. I know exactly what you're thinking because I would have thought it too, 10, 15-ish years ago or so. But wait, Judah, doesn't the book of Genesis describe God creating, the earth, the universe, the everything from nothing? Yesh me'ayin, we've got something from nothing. Well, no, it actually doesn't. If you go back and reread it, you'll see that at the beginning of chapter 1 of the book of Genesis, you're going to notice that the heavens and the earth are already created in verse 1. Everything that's sort of created after that just sort of emerges from the heavens and the earth. Case in point, God says, let there be light. Well, that light must have originated someplace else because, there is no source of light on earth. Therefore, it originated in the heavens. But guess what? The heavens already existed. God said when he was creating plants, God said, hey, let the earth produce vegetation. What's the key phrase in there? Let the earth produce it. It never once says, and God fashioned plants out of nothing. But the Yisra does just that. It openly asserts that God created everything from nothing. So there's that. That's kind of cool. I'm going to look at the next point in my notes here. So after the Sephira, or after the Sefer Yisra was written, it was widely studied in mystical circles, and there are actually still commentaries on it today that are read. Sometime after the Yisra, there were other minor mystical tractates that were written. The most famous of them, though, the most influential of them, was actually, I would not call it a minor tractate in the least. In the 12th century, there was a book that came out called the Sefer HaBahir, which is like the Book of Illumination. It sounds very Gnostic, if you know anything about Gnosticism. But the Sefer HaBahir, it was written in the form of a mystical commentary, basically a midrash, on the Torah. It expounds on the themes of creation, the Hebrew alphabet, the Sephiroth, and the human soul. And it draws much of its inspiration from the Sefer Yisra. Why? Well, because, these are part of the same general mystical tradition family. So there's that. Unlike most of the mystical works before it, the Bahir specifically teaches the concept of Gilgul Neshamot, the reincarnation of souls, that souls of the deceased can be reincarnated into a different body, or that part of the soul is reincarnated into another body. There are varying levels of reincarnation that I'm not going to get into because, got to be honest with you, I don't believe it. I just don't accept the concept of reincarnation. I don't not accept it. I don't oppose it. I just don't accept it because I see no evidence for it whatsoever in the Torah, anyway. There is actually, surprisingly, evidence for it in the Gospels. It's going to shock my Christian viewers a little bit. Oh, what do you mean there's evidence of reincarnation in the Gospels? Well, there is. I can show you later. In fact, I probably will end up showing you later at some point. But you're also going to see reincarnation in other religions in the general region of Israel. So, for example, the Druzim, which Druz is kind of like an offshoot of Islam. Obviously, it came later, but they believe in reincarnation. Actually, the Druze came about before the Bahir was written, so it's actually very possible that some of the more mystical Jews at the time were influenced by the Druze to believe in reincarnation. So, not important where it came from, just kind of a interesting little rabbit trail to follow. Now, the foundational work of modern mysticism. This is where it's going to get fun. This is where many Orthodox Jews will pick up stones to start throwing at me. Don't. I'm just giving you information that anyone can find if they know where to look. And I'm actually going to give you one of my sources so that you can look it up yourself if you so desire. So the foundational work of the modern Jewish mystical tradition is the Zohar. It was written by Rabbi Moshe de Leon in 13th century CE in what is now Spain. Now he claimed, and this is where people are going to start to freak out on me, he claimed that really he just had an older book that was originally written by Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai in the 2nd century CE, but he did not. As it turns out, modern day scholars believe that he wrote it. I mean, it's very clear that that someone at the same time as him did write it, Rabbi Moshe de Leon, that is, not Shimon ben Yochai. So it's very clear that somebody in medieval Spain wrote it. And scholars also believe that perhaps he's also, I don't want to say guilty because it's not necessarily a crime, but he also forged some other writings from the period of the Gaonim, which, by the way, is the 6th to 11th century Babylonian Jewish academy heads. I believe earlier I said that it was the 2nd to 6th century CE. I was wrong. Got a couple of my wires crossed there. Now back to the Zohar. So it is universally accepted that Rabbi Moshe de Leon did not find an old manuscript, and just publish it. What he did was he actually wrote the Zohar, and there are actually the evidence to back it up is actually really sort of staggering. But the fact that the Zohar was actually written by a medieval rabbi in Spain, now that doesn't stop modern-day mystics from studying it and believing wholeheartedly that Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai authored it. And it is technically possible, I suppose, that there are some layers of it that perhaps are based on some of Shimon bar Yochai's sayings, various things that he taught. But come on. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And keeping a book hidden for well over 1,000 years, passing it from one person to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, for over 1,000 years with nobody else ever hearing of it, well, that's a pretty extraordinary claim. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that because I just basically said that, and because I'm openly not on team Shimon ben Yochai wrote the Zohar, I'm certain that there are going to be some people that are going to give me a stern talking to after they see this video, and that's okay. Because you can't argue with facts. Facts are facts, and that's all there is to it. It's what you do with them that determines where you're going to be, basically. Ultimately, it really doesn't even matter who wrote the Zohar, because it's widely accepted, though not universally accepted, but it's widely accepted in Jewish society today, and it's probably not going to change. Now, the Zohar was written primarily in Zoharic Aramaic, and that is an artificial dialect of Aramaic that was actually created. It is a fusion of the dialect of the Babylonian Talmud and the dialect of Targum Onkelos. That is not my words. I am not telling you that in and of myself. That is based on the studies of Gershom Sholem, who is the world's, or was before he passed away, the world's foremost expert on Jewish mystical groups, Jewish mysticism, and that sort of thing. Now, according to Sholem, Zoharic Aramaic was limited severely by Rabbi Moshe de Leon's imperfect grammar. He just didn't have a full grasp of the language. He had a very limited vocabulary, and he relied heavily on loan words, get this, from not just other ancient languages, but from contemporary languages, like specifically Old Spanish. So the Spanish that was spoken at the time is actually in the Zohar. But somehow it was written 2,000 years ago. Wow, it predicted Spanish. Come on. These people that wholeheartedly believe it, most of them are smarter than that. They just don't want to believe it, and that's fine. That's fine. There are also long strings occasionally, long strings of Aramaic appearing gibberish. It's gibberish that just appears to be Aramaic to the uninitiated, to people who are not that familiar with it, probably because Moshe de Leon himself was not that familiar with it. But it gives the impression of, some sort of esoteric knowledge. So before you pick up rocks to throw at me, just keep in mind, I am not telling you information that is, coming from me. This is based on the study of scholars like Gershom Sholem and Isaiah Tishby. Throw rocks at them, I guess. I don't know. Now, the Zohar is not necessarily a single book. It's actually composed of several works that really look like they were all composed by the same circle of rabbis in medieval Spain. It's kind of interesting, but not important. So the content's laid out like it's a mystical commentary to the Torah, which it's what it is. In case you're curious, this is what it looks like. Not very exciting stuff in the Aramaic. Unless you can understand it. There's got some really interesting things in it. But again, it is at best a pseudepigraphical work. At worst, it's a forgery. But it is what it is. That being said, it is interesting from an anthropological perspective to show us what the mystics of that region of Spain at that time believed. So there's that. Now, the most modern prayer books, okay, these are Sidurim, they will have some passages from the Zohar in them. And that's, that is what it is. It's like I said, the Zohar, while it's not universally accepted, it is very widely accepted. Looking over my notes. But yes, so you'll find, even in prayer books dating back to the 16th century, you'll find that the Zohar was already starting to creep in. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Rabbi Avraham ben Rambam, the Rambam's son, Abraham, who was a rabbi in his own right, stated that by his day, the earlier mystical traditions had already long been dead. That there was no, he's famous actually for saying there is no surviving extant mystical Torah tradition that is authentic. So at the very least, he was widely ignorant of any surviving traditions. Leads me and anyone with, the same mindset I have to believe that, well, he was probably right. Because there's no way you're going to keep for 2,000 years. You're not going to keep it, I guess it wasn't 2,000 years, but for, 1,300 years or so, you're not going to be able to keep it quiet. Somebody is going to, talk about it during that time to somebody, and word's going to get around. But the Zohar is actually an extremely important book when it comes to reviving interest in the mystical tradition. So there's that. After the Zohar was written, there were actually several mystical works that were composed based on the teachings of the Zohar and based on the worldview of different Hasidic groups. These would be the Hasidic writings. Collectively, these writings form the bulk of the Hasidic tradition. That's going to be groups like the Chabad Lubavitchers. It's going to be groups like the Gera. That's going to be groups like Satmar. Maybe not Satmar. Just kidding. Just kidding. They're not going to watch this, but they are a Hasidic group. I disagree with them on just about everything, but that's okay. Various different groups. Breslov, I actually like Breslov. Also like Chabad. Lubavitchers are cool. Doesn't mean I agree with them on everything, but I actually like them. Good people, good tradition in general. It has its issues, but every tradition has issues. Some of the more well-known Hasidic works around today, to get back on topic, are, bust out my glasses for a minute, the Tanya in the Chabad Lubavitch tradition, the Meor Enayim in the Chernobyl tradition. Yes, I am talking about that Chernobyl, the one that went the big boom almost 40 years ago now. And I know that because I was born the year that it melted down. So there's that. I was on the other side of the world, so it wasn't me. The Sfas Emes in the Ger tradition, and the Likutei Moharan in the Breslov tradition, and it's really strange for me to I know that those of you who don't know Hebrew are just like, it sounds right to me. It doesn't sound right to me. I'm pronouncing those in the Ashkenazi pronunciation because that's the pronunciation that Hasidic groups use. I only use Ashkenazi pronunciation for Ashkenazi works because it just sounds kind of dumb without it. Sfas Emes, okay, well, that's the Ashkenazi pronunciation. Sfat Emet is how it should be said, but not important. That's how I would say it anyway. Anyways, so the Hasidic groups have written more and more books, based on their mystical traditions. You have the Tanya. I'm just going to look at some of the Chabad works. You have the Tanya. And you have a ton of commentaries based off of the Tanya. You have the writings of the various Rebbes. The last Lubavitcher Rebbe, the seventh one, Menachem Mendel Schneerson, who passed away in 1990, I think 3. Could have been 94, I can't remember. I was very young. But so his talks are collected into, his teachings are collected into books, and I assume it's the same in every Hasidic group that's out there, that they collect the teachings of their Rebbes and publish them. Interesting fact about the Tanya, if you remember from, I believe it was last time, the Shulchan Aruch HaRav was written by Shner Zalman of Liadi, who was the Alter Rebbe, the founder of the Chabad movement. He also wrote the Tanya. So there's my fun fact for the day. The mystical tradition within Judaism is much, much bigger than I could put in this video. There are mystical sects dating back to God knows when in antiquity, and there will probably be mystical sects, going forward until God knows when in the future. I don't know. I'm not going to get into them much. In fact, I'm going to be wrapping up this video now. But if you would like to learn more about the mystical traditions, I highly recommend this book, Kabbalah by Gershom Scholem. It is a definitive history of the evolution, ideas, leading figures, and extraordinary influence of Jewish mysticism. It actually is a great book. It's a little dry, but it's actually a really great book for, just learning about it. It's certainly worth a read if you're interested in that sort of thing. Now, that being said, I am done. We made it through another video. Next week will be the last official video in this series, and then the week after is going to be a special bonus video. So yeah, that's all I got. Next week we're actually going to be talking about prayer books and the Haggadah, which are not technically part of the Jewish Torah tradition, but they are an outgrowth of it. Excuse me. That being said, I am done. By all means, if you enjoyed this video, like it, subscribe to the channel, hit the notifications button, turn it on so that you get to see my pretty face every time you log on and I've posted a new video. It tells you, it's like, hey, this guy, he's crazy, but he put out this video, go check it out. Find me on Facebook. There are actually a couple of you that already have. You've found me on Facebook, and we've been, communicating back and forth, and it's great. I love it. Let's keep it up. Any questions you have, feel free to reach out to me. You can leave it in the comments here if you so desire, or find me on Facebook, and you can privately message it to me if it's of a more sensitive nature, or if it's of something that you don't necessarily want to be public information. I will keep it confidential, I promise you. I'm not gonna, oh, John Smith wants to know, what the Jewish position on, this is. I'm not going to do that because, well, it would embarrass some people. That being said, have a great week. And I will see you back here. Well, I won't see you, but you'll see me back here next week. So that's all I got. And go find me on Facebook. Like, subscribe. I think I've already gone over this. That's all I got. Shalom.